Okay, hold on. Okay, there we go. So let me just quickly introduce myself. And again, this workshop will be recorded, and the recording will be saved to the Google Drive, which will be given to you guys, and you guys can refer back to the recording at a later time. So first off, a little self-introduction about myself. I'm Emily. You can see about my name. I'm a sophomore at Interlake High School. Yeah, and I like playing volleyball. I like playing with my kitty, and I also am in the IB diploma program. So first off, I just want to gauge kind of where we're at. So if you haven't ever like worked with Java or learned Java before, I want you guys to raise your hands on Zoom right now. Okay, right now we have like 5 people. Okay,
Raise your hand.
Oh, you click on participants and then
Yeah, I did it already.
Okay, great, good job. Okay, some of you raised your hands, that's great. I'm assuming that means the rest of you have like learned a little bit of Java. And just again, this workshop, you guys can lower your hands now. Just to let you guys know, this workshop is beginners Java. So if you guys think it's a little bit too easy, you can feel free to leave and go to Helena's advanced Java workshop at 3 o'clock tomorrow. But you could also use this as kind of like a review for just the basics of Java. And for those of you who have not learned Java before, this class is going to just teach you from the beginning. So I just want to say, this class is going to be pretty fast paced because I only have around an hour to cover all of the basics of Java. So it's going to seem pretty fast. But the good thing is that it's all recorded. The presentation materials will be sent out to you guys later on. And also, there's going to be additional resources that are available if you want to look more into certain subjects or certain areas of Java. So don't worry about that. Okay, last thing, for this workshop, there's optional materials. You can follow along on Eclipse if you'd like. Well, now it's a little bit late, but you can still do it. The download for Eclipse should be in the email that we sent out earlier today, or in the Discord chat. I think there might be some info as well. But I think just following along in Notepad is sufficient. Yeah. Okay, let me share my screen and then I can begin talking a little bit about Java. Okay, hold on. Let me share my screen. Okay, so since this is going to be a pretty fast-paced lesson on Java, and you guys are going to be trying to, it doesn't matter if you guys are going to be using Java in the hackathon. The most important thing I think about learning Java at its beginnings is to really understand the concept of what you're doing. So what syntax is it's kind of like programming grammar. Like it's like the words you actually have to do a certain thing. But I think learning the syntax right now isn't as important as knowing the concepts and knowing how to apply certain areas to different things. Like maybe if you wanted to code a certain thing, you know that you could use an array to store these values to make that work. And if you need the syntax, there's always the resources that I have. And a simple like search on Google can get you the syntax that you need. So again, I think as long as we understand the concept, it's going to be okay. So I'm not going to make you guys do like code like something really complicated right now because I don't expect you guys to know the syntax right away. Okay, if you I don't think anyone has come in recently, but if you have, we've just started, and again, it's recorded, so you can always look back on the recording later after this presentation. Okay, let's begin. Wait, okay. Okay. So first off, let's start off with the basics. So these are terms you probably know already, but with all of my Java classes, I usually go over this at the very beginning. So first, what a computer program is: collection of instructions that can be executed by a computer to perform a certain task. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Java is a computer programming language. English is too complicated for computers to know and learn by themselves. So Java is kind of like that in-between language. So it's a computer programming language. And then compiler is kind of like a translator that translates Java to the native computer language or binary. And the compiler that I use and that actually the AP curriculum uses and a lot of people use is Eclipse, which again, the info should be in the email that we sent out earlier or in the Discord. So now I'm actually going to be getting into the content of Java and actually what you have to know about Java itself. So parts of a program, this actually can be applied to more than just Java, but it's important to understand the parts of a program, especially when you're working with different things. And having a fundamental understanding about the parts of a program will help you later on when you don't have to just work with a main method. I'll explain what that is later. And you have to work with more complicated things like classes and objects. So first of all, I kind of use this Lego analogy a lot. I think it's pretty helpful to kind of understand how everything works. So like, let's say you have like a Lego, like look at this cute Lego giraffe. That would be your Java project. It's like the whole outcome of what you want to be done. You know, it's like the finished product, right? And then within the project, it's made up, it's like built up with your classes. And what classes are, they're actually like the term for them in a textbook is actually the building blocks of Java. And that you can take that kind of literally with this analogy. So classes are used, they have different functions and they're used to build up your Java project or your program that you're making. And then within the classes, your classes are going to have multiple different methods. Okay, the different methods are going to have different tasks. Like let's say instead of building a Lego, we're going to go to more of an actual task. Let's say you're making a cake. That's your project. Okay, like and usually when we're working very simply, you only have one class. When you're working with more advanced Java, you might have more than one class. But for now, we're only going to like imagine we have one class. So in that class, we have multiple methods, and these methods might be make the batter and then make the frosting. You know, so they each have different tasks that they do, and then their names often reflect what task they're going to do. And then your methods, so your methods that have different tasks to do are going to be made up of statements. And you can kind of think of statements as the fibers within, it's like everything is made up of your statements. Everything is made up of plastic fibers when you're building with Legos. So statement is the lines, you know, the lines of code. Yeah, you can take it pretty literally. Okay. Yeah, so that would just be the parts of a program. And I need to add that if you have any questions at any point, feel free to put it in the chat. I'll respond to it as soon as possible, or maybe Nathan, if you see it before I do, you could respond to it. Yeah, Nathan, you should know him. And also, yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to unmute as well. I think that's the quickest way to ask me any questions. Yeah, so just letting you guys know, questions are good. I like questions. Okay, next. So now I'm going to talk about the parts of a program, but in the context of actually like a program. Like you see, this is programming, it's words, not just a Lego anymore. So, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, 2 slashes before the titles. That's a good question. Yeah, so it's actually kind of formatting right here. Okay, there's 2 things to it. One is formatting, right? It's the PowerPoint theme is kind of like a programming theme. So you can see there's like line numbers on the side. 2 slashes in front of something means that you're commenting that line out. So it's like a comment. You know, if you comment it out, it doesn't actually affect your code. It's just there. So 2 slashes in front of any line means that you're commenting that line out. So it's kind of a stylistic, kind of fun thing with this formatting of this PowerPoint, but it's also a good thing to know when you're programming to add comments. Okay, great. So, okay, different classes. Wait, hold on. The little view thing on the side is being weird. Okay, so again, parts of a program. First is your class. Your class is like the whole thing. It's the whole building block of that certain area you're doing. And then your method, which is within the class, right? And here we have a very special type of method. Now this method is called the main method. You don't always need the main method, but especially when you're beginning with programming, the main method will be extremely helpful. So what the main method does, and the syntax is public static void main string args, is to, it kind of acts like a blueprint, like an instruction list for the rest of your program. So you can see in the main method here, I have a statement, system.out.println hello world, and I'll explain that very soon as well. But that statement is just like you're going to print out that statement first. And let's say you had another method. You could call that method in the main method to kind of like know the order of what you're going to do when you run that program. So the main method is kind of like the blueprint for your whole program and how, in what order it's going to run. Okay, on the side here, we have a little visual of like how everything is like within each other and the big thing is programmed. So just another way you can kind of get to understand the parts of a program. Okay, yeah, again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm going to be moving on into our first exercise. Well, it's not really an exercise, but okay. So we're going to be trying to write the hello world statement together. And I'm mostly going to be demoing this, but if you want to follow along, again, in any online compiler, just search up Java Online Compiler. Any one of those should work, or just your notepad because it keeps the formatting of whatever you're writing, or in Eclipse if you have Eclipse. Yeah, so I'm going to begin demoing using Eclipse. And what a Hello World program is, it's kind of a programmer tradition per se. It's like a lot of people, when they're first trying out a new platform or maybe a new language, they always write a Hello World statement first. And it's just, yeah, it's kind of like a tradition that a lot of us do. And I know if you attended Albert's Python class earlier today, I think he also mentioned creating a Hello World. Okay, so let me share to Eclipse to show you guys how to set up a program in Eclipse. Now, if you're not using Eclipse, you don't really have to worry about this, but it's good to keep in the back of your mind as well. So first, my version of Eclipse might be a little bit different from yours, but the terms of like what you're trying to select should be generally the same. So I'm going to go to File, New, and then Project, and I'm going to create a Java project. Okay, well, because we're doing Java, right? So it's a Java project. And once I create a project, I'm going to need a project name. And I'm just going to name this project Hackathon. You can name it Hello World, you can name it anything you want, but right now I'm just going to name it Hackathon. Okay, so you can see I'm going to wait a little for anyone who's following on Eclipse. But yeah, it should be pretty simple. It's just very standard, and then you just click Finish. And then once you do that, the Java project should be created. Wait, hold on. My computer is a little slow. Okay, and then once your project is created, you can see that nothing has happened. That's because you actually need to create a class to actually do your project. It's like when you're building a Lego piece, if you don't use the Lego pieces and you don't like take them out of the box, you're not gonna have like a structure. You're not gonna have your Lego project, right? So you need to actually have classes to have like your program like birth it into existence. It's a weird analogy, but okay. So next I want to create a new class. So again, class, you click next, and the source folder you want to select is the project that you created earlier. So I would use a source folder of Hackathon, right? And then the name of it, I could just make it Hello World, okay? So, because I'm writing a Hello World statement. Okay, wait a tiny bit for people. Okay, I'm moving on. So. Okay, now you can see something actually pops up, and that's going to be the frame for our class, our Hello World class within our Hackathon project. Okay, so I'm going to begin with actually writing it. Again, if you want to follow along, feel free to do so, or you can just kind of listen and take it in. Anything fine is fine, anything works for me. So the main method is public static void main string, string is capitalized, args. And then you would spelled public wrong. And then you would put the content that you need within your main method. And again, after every statement in Java that you write, for example, I'm going to write my hello world statement, you need to have a semicolon after every statement. Now, Python doesn't need to have this, but Java, you have to have a semicolon after every statement. And every Java teacher is going to tell you this because if you don't have a semicolon, your program is not going to run, you're going to get an error. And then after hours of searching, you're just going to find out that you didn't have a semicolon. So a semicolon after every statement that you write. Okay, so the statement I want to write is called a system.out.println statement, or for short, a println statement. And what this statement does is it prints a line inside the quotation marks to your console. And in the console right here is this thing. At the bottom, you see this kind of this box thing. And so you can interact with the console in Java. We're going to be working with that later when we move into scanners. But just remember console, that's where you print out your statement if you use a println statement. Okay, so I'm going to do system.out.println, and then inside these quotation marks, I can print out whatever I want. And the formatting of this whole thing is going to be looking a little bit different if you're using an online compiler, but just the syntax should be exactly the same. Okay, so I can print out hello world right here, and then how to run a program. This is pretty universal across all different compilers, but run is like a little triangle inside a green circle or whatever color circle. Usually it's green, but yeah, I click this and then my program runs. And you can see printed out to the console is hello world, because it's a hello world statement. Okay, so that is, we successfully wrote our hello world statement. That's the most basic introduction to Java before we move on to a bit more complicated, nuanced components of Java. Before I move on to the next section, let me share my screen back to the PowerPoint. Does anyone have any questions? I'm gonna wait for a couple seconds and then I'll move on. Okay, no questions. Again, if I do pass something and then you're like, oh shoot, I didn't ask a question, but I'm still wondering it, just put it in the chat and I'll get to it as soon as I can. Okay, current slide. Okay, so after we finished our hello world statement, I'm going to talk about data types. So this is actually getting into like different areas of Java, not just printing it out to the console, simple. This is still pretty intuitive for those of you who have learned variables before. But if those of you haven't, you guys will just learn as we go on. And again, if this seems too fast, don't worry. We'll have additional resources at the end. And also this PowerPoint as well as recording will be available to you after this workshop. Okay, so data types in Java is just what you're working with, like the things that you're working with. So in Java, there's two types of data. There's primitive data types and there's objects. So primitive data types are a lot easier than objects to understand and to work with. So we're going to be talking about primitive data types first. And talking about objects, we're not going to go into that too deeply, but we will touch on it a little bit, introduce it to you guys, the concept at a later time in this workshop today. If you want to learn more about more complicated concepts such as sorting algorithms, recursion, make sure to check out Helena's meeting tomorrow, 3 o'clock p.m. PST. So there's four main types of primitive data types. There are actually 8 different primitive data types, but there's 4 main types, and the other 4 are variations of the main 4. So we only need to focus on these first 4. So their names are int, double, char, and boolean. So really quickly going over them. An int is an integer. For example, like literally a whole number. A double is a real number. So just anything with a decimal point, essentially. Char is a single character. And remember, a char is very different from a string, but we'll talk about that a little. And then a boolean, which is just true or false, logical, true or false. So again, the only difference between int and double is that int has no decimal point and double has a decimal point. And that's the main way that we can use to like differentiate. Is this an int? Is this a double? So yeah, I know this is also a lot of new vocab, so don't worry about memorizing all of this right now. Okay, so initializing a variable. Whenever I say initialize right here, I mean create. Okay, initializing is just create. Okay, is 10 equals 10.0? Okay, I don't really know what you mean by that. Could you clarify? because in Java, the equal sign can mean different things, but for now I'm going to say no, because one is an integer and one is a double. There are different like nuances for converting integers to doubles using casting and so on and so forth. But if you just ask, is that equal to that? No. And also, yeah, in Java, the syntax for equals is double equal sign. So that would be an assignment operator. So further no, but I'm assuming you mean like equals equals. Yeah, no, not in Java. But you could cast it. Again, that is like more complicated things. I'm just giving a general overview of Java. So you can check out additional resources. I'm sure they'll talk about casting and like data type exceptions, which would go to, yeah. I think that should output to false. Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, because they're different data types. Okay, yeah, so that should be false. Okay, yeah. They're different data types, but if you do cast one, like if you cast an integer to a double, which means like you force it kind of to be turned into a double, it should like be true. But since they're different data types, it's false. Okay. So initializing a variable is just creating your variable. So variables in Java, they're kind of like now you know your data types. Now, what if you want to store a data type? What if you want to like manipulate it, change its value, save it for later usage? Okay, that's where variables come in. And variables are used, in math all the time. So it should be a little bit intuitive. If you have learned variables before, if you haven't, it's okay. So you can kind of think of variables as when you create a variable, kind of like a little box in your computer's memory is kind of like cut out, and then you kind of can store a certain value into that box, give it a name, and refer back to that slot in memory, and that would be your variable. So how you initialize a variable, you need a data type. So what type of data is int, double, char, boolean, as well. If you want to use the various types like float, long, you can, but no one really, you don't use that as much. And then the name, your assignment operator, the value of your variable, and always semicolon ends a statement. So the data type for in this example, int, name is a, assignment operator. Okay, again, Albert, you said this like assignment operator in Java is equals, not equals equals, right? So the equals would just be saying that this integer has this value. So, and then you have the value, which in this case, it's 2. Okay, so that would be how you initialize a variable or how you create one. Now, how would you assign a variable to a new value or maybe change a variable's value? So variables is very similar to creating a variable, but you don't need the data type because you have already declared the variable to have a data type just then in the declaration. So you just need to refer back to the variable with its name, and then use the assignment operator and then the new value. And so this would change the variable of the box to be 2, or like the value of the variable to be 2. Okay, and again, semicolon ends the statement. So that's how you would change the value of your variable in Java. Okay, next. So this is a different section now. So, just chat. Yeah, you can do that. Okay, so that's a different way. Okay, hold on, let me go back. So like I said, when you're initializing a variable, I said this is the way I use. And you can also use auto initialization. So when you initialize a variable, you don't have to automatically assign it to a value. You can just put a semicolon after int a, and that would auto initialize that variable. And what auto initialize means is it for ints and doubles, it auto initializes that variable to 0. But for like booleans, it does null. So it's a little bit different, but just basically you can kind of think of it as 0. And then when you declare it or when you assign that variable to a value, you put 2 into a slot. So it is to the same effect, but just automatically initializing right then and there it kind of saves lines and is also a little bit more intuitive. So that's the way I use. But yes, your way, you can also just do int a and then a equals 2. That also works. Okay. How do you input a value? What do you mean input a value? Like, you mean print it to the console, or like user, oh, okay. That's going to be more of scanners, which we'll talk about later. In Java, scanners are actually a little bit more complicated because scanners are objects, which we're going to learn about later. Yeah. There are a lot of ways you can have user input through the console in Java as well. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Nathan has clarified that if you do 10 equals 10, Java automatically converts it to a double, so it will return true. Okay, that's good. It is a little bit confusing, these nuances, but Nathan, I'm glad you clarified it. Thank you for that. Okay, and yeah, Albert, that makes sense. Okay, so arithmetic operators are basically how you kind of work with variables, and they're often used in expressions, but they can be used in different ways. So most of these arithmetic operators work exactly how you would expect them to, except for mod, which is kind of finding the remainder of something. So let's say you did, in the example, 19 mod 5 is basically find the remainder of 19 divided by 5, okay? And then the result would be 4, because 19 divided by 5, you had 3, 15, 4. And okay, the rest of them, 2 plus 2, pretty easy. I don't think I have to explain that. So, okay, for powers, there's actually a like math.pow that you can use to do a power. Yeah, I don't think we use powers too much, but there's like you can import a package, the math package, and then use math.pow, and that would POW, and that's how you would make like 2 to the power of 3. But again, this is like pretty beginner, but good question. Yeah, you have to import an extra package, I think. So yeah. You can still do it though, and if you want the specific syntax, I don't have it off the top of my head right now, but you can always look at the extra resources or just search it up. I'm sure there are lots of things out there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Nathan. Okay, so quick question for you all. Okay, let's say I had 10 mod 3. What would be the answer of 10 mod 3, knowing that mod is A divided by B and the remainder of that? Nice. Okay, yeah, 10 mod 3 would be 1. Good job, good job. And it's pretty self-explanatory. 3 times 3, 9, that's the most times 3 can go into 10. 10 minus 9 is 1. So yeah, good job. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now we're going to be talking about for loops. And I'm sure a lot of you know about for loops and generally what they do. I think a lot of you have interacted with for loops on at least like code.org or something before. Okay, so again, sometimes I'll have extra info, which I'll put like a little link on the top. One of the great websites for learning Java is W3 Schools, and it has some really like user-friendly information and like kid-friendly that is pretty easy to understand. So, okay. Okay, situation, I'm gonna build up a situation. Let's say I told you to clap, and then you clapped. And then I told you to clap again, and then you clapped again. And I told you to clap a third time, and then I clapped again. So what would be faster? If I had told you to clap, 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 or if I told you just to clap 3 times? Obviously, telling you to just clap 3 times off the bat would be way easier and way simpler. That is exactly what for loops do for programmers. For loops take something that would take a lot of time and make it so that you can achieve the same effect with less amount of work and also less amount of lines. It's a great way to kind of conserve that space and also to simplify your code. Okay, so for loops, the syntax for for loops is right here. You have a for loop initialization, test, update. And then you have your statements that you want to be looped, you want to loop through. So for example, let's say I had for int I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus, and then you print something out. So right here, you initialize this variable I to be in your for loop. Now, you don't have to use the variable I. It's just that a lot of programmers like to use I as a variable for loops. I don't really know why. Wait, hold on. I saw a chat. Okay, why isn't there a semicolon after the I++? That's because these semicolons in these for loops aren't semicolons ending a statement. As you can see, like right here, system.out.print, there's a semicolon. That's because it's a statement. That's actually the syntax within the for loop. So the semicolons aren't to end a statement in this case. They're to separate the different like kind of steps of that for loop. So that's why you want to have a semicolon after. It's just simply syntax. It's not really anything like special or anything, but yeah, it's just how that works. Okay, nice. So right here, before I answer that question, I was talking about you create the variable, right? And that initialize the variable, usually you do 0, and then you do the test. So what the test is what you want to test that variable every time you loop through that statement. So kind of the flow of the for loop kind of goes like this. You do int, then you do this, and then you go around, and then you loop around. That's a bad picture. But what I'm trying to say is that every time you go through the for loop, you test for if I is still less than 10, okay? And then every time you finish executing the statements within your for loop, you update your variable. So in this case, I update it using I++. That's going to make I 1 more than it was previously. So I would be in I equals 0. Is I less than 10? Yes. And then you do system.print asterisk. And then you go, okay, now I have to update I. I is now 1. Okay, I is 1. Is I less than 10? 1 is less than 10, etc. And then you go through the loop again. Now, if I was, now I equals 9, okay? And you go, in I equals 9. And then you do, is I less than 10? Yeah, it is. Then you do the statement within, the for loop, update it. Now I would be 10. Okay, you go, in I is 10. Is I less than 10? Okay, I is not less than 10 now. 10 is not less than 10. So it would be false. Now at that point, you would exit out of the for loop and continue on with whatever you have below. Okay, so that's how the for loop kind of works. That's how you kind of go through the process of using a for loop. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And of course, you can initialize your variable to a different value and also like make the test a different value depending on what you want to loop, how many times you want to loop it, etc. Okay, and also you can use the variable I within your statement as well, right? You can print out I in your for loop. So for example, this example I have right here, which I will put in which I will demo really quickly in Eclipse. Okay, we have, okay, yeah, you could do that. So yeah, that's, oh my, okay, again, that's a little bit more complicated about than what we're learning today. But again, you can do nested for loops. And something I really liked about your for loop was that you had a different variable for the nested for loop inside. That's very important because of the variable's scope, which is the extent to which they act. So, because you can't have an I within your for loop that already uses that variable I. So you do need a different variable. In this case, Albert used J, which does work perfectly well. And yeah, that should work really well. I don't see any problem with that. So yeah, good job. One thing is the semicolon after the println statement, but that's fine. And also the system is capitalized. The S is capital letter. But yeah, just little things. Overall, your idea is perfectly fine. Okay, let me just go into Eclipse. Okay, hold on. Wait, that was not Eclipse. Okay. So yeah, let's just continue off of this. Again, I can just comment this out using the 2 forward slashes, and then let's just make a for loop. For int I equals 0, you do like I is less than 10, I plus plus, hold on, that, okay. And then I can have whatever I want. So I can be like system.out.println. This is iteration. And then I could concatenate my variable to the end of that. And then be happy. Yeah, so if I run that, it should print out, this is iteration 0. This is iteration 1. This is iteration 2, all the way up to 9, right? Because if you go to 10, 10 is not less than 10, so it exits out of the for loop. And because I don't have anything after the for loop, it just finishes that the class, or like what I'm running right now. So yeah, so this would be, this is iteration 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's how you would use, or that's how you would program using a for loop in Java. Now let me share back to the PowerPoint again. Wait, hold on. I don't know if you can just refresh. Okay, well, let me scroll back. Okay, so the next thing we're going to be working with is while loops. And while loop, I don't know why I did that. And while loops they're very similar to for loops. They do the exact same thing, but they're written in a different way. And there's like different variations of while loops, such as do while loops, that do slightly different things. But again, we're just going to go over the most basic form of every concept, or every basic concept in Java right now. So we're not going to go into that. Again, that link at the bottom, you're going to get more on while loops, including the variations of while loops. So check that out if you want to just read a little further into this. So again, they're mostly the same as for loops, but they're written in a different way. They still have the same 3 indicators: the initialization, test, update. Hold on, let me drink some water. My throat is getting dry. Okay. So first, initialization. Instead of happening within the for loop, this happens before the loop. So you create a variable, initialize it before your while loop. Again, you have a test. This test just checks if that variable is still fits, that test that you have. Then you have your statements, and your update is going to occur somewhere within your statements. So like at the end of all your statements, you could have I++, and that would work the exact same way as for loops do. And I'm not going to give an example because it's really similar to for loops. And on the little top right, we have a little flow chart that kind of shows you what the process is when you're actually running through that for loop, or that while loop, sorry. Okay. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about conditional statements. And conditional statements, maybe it sounds a little complicated, but it really isn't. So we're going to be learning the most simple forms of conditional statements today, because again, this is a beginner class, so we're just going to be going over the most basic forms. So first of all, it's an if statement. If statement is really simple. If the test is true, the test in little parentheses after the if, you run whatever statements are within that if statement. If that test is false, you can skip it, or it like skips that if statement. So it's very simple. If else statement is similar, but there's an extra component to it, the else statement, kind of obvious. So if the test is true, you run the first part within those first curly braces, and you skip the second in the second curly braces. But if it's false, you skip the first set of statements within that if loop, that if statement, and you run the second set of statements within the else. So it's kind of like true, you do the first, ignore the second, and then false, you ignore the first, do the second. Okay, so still relatively simple. Okay, elif. Okay, okay, I don't really know what you're asking with elif, but there is no elif syntax to my knowledge. Yeah, but
I think whoever posted that means else if.
Oh yeah, there is else if. There's else if. Thank you for the clarification. But yeah, there is else if statements. That usually goes between if statements and else statements. So in between you could have if, blah blah, else if, and then you have another test after that else if, and then have a statement, and then at the end usually you would have an else to kind of act as a catch-all. Okay, elif is actually just Python, but in Java, I'm guessing, I don't know Python. There's a similar thing that's else if. Yeah, that does probably a similar thing as well. But again, I don't really know Python well, so yeah. But yeah, thank you for the clarification if that was what you were asking, Freya. Okay. So some more operators, these are usually useful when you're comparing different values. And again, within these operators, there are very slight nuances that, like, there are exceptions in everything, you know, and you can read about these exceptions in the various resources we have, but I'm just going to be going over the most basic cases. So operators, again, equality relations, these evaluate to a Boolean, which, like I said, is a data type, which is just true or false. So it's going to evaluate to true or false. Pretty simple. So equals equals double equal sign. This means equals, like the equals that we know, and love. So one equals is the assignment operator, which is, you know, like we said, assigning a variable to a value or creating that variable and assigning it to a value. So our equals equals is testing the equivalence of the values. Again, it doesn't change either of these values. And yeah, Albert hinted at this at the beginning. So yeah, Nathan has some info on else if. Yeah, so yeah, it does have same functions as Python, different syntax. Yeah, check that out if you want to read a little bit on that. Nathan put a link in the chat. Okay, thank you, Nathan. So there's not equals, which is testing if it's not equal. And then less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than, equal to, pretty simple, pretty intuitive that we've been working with this in math a lot. So the syntax for this is you would have operand, which is like what you're working with, the operator, so how you're comparing it, and then the second operand. So like A equals B, and you'd have like, is A equals to B? If true, do this. If false, do this. That's one of the ways you can apply these operators. Okay. So logical operators are similar, but they are they're also conditional. So like not Boolean would just execute execute the statement that Boolean, but not, for not Boolean, for not statements, usually they're also used, to my knowledge, within if statements. It's like you do like if not Boolean, like do this. So like if this is not true, so like if that Boolean is false, you can execute this statement, right? And then, yeah, Leo, do you have a question?
Yeah, so can you do something like say you have you create a condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you multiply it by a number?
I don't think so, but I don't know what multiplying a number would do.
Because in other programming languages, basically you can treat a condition say if A is equal to 1 and B is equal to 2,
Mm-hmm.
you can treat that condition as a number where it's 0 if it's false and 1 if it's true, I think. Yeah.
I think you could assign something like that. I'm not completely sure. Nathan, if you want to answer that, Nathan does know a bit about Java as well. So if you know, you could answer, but I think that it may be possible for you to assign a value to a Boolean, but usually I think you don't really need to do that because it's kind of incorporated in your conditional statements. Like you could just do not Boolean. So yeah, I feel like you probably could. There's probably some syntax out there that can do that, but you know, especially when you're just starting out, it's not really necessary. Okay, again, Nathan, if you want to clarify or like correct me, because you know I can be wrong, yeah, just feel free to do that. So again, and or, I think a lot of different programming languages have this as well. Again, you can use it to test things. So like if this and this is true, do this, this or this is true, etc. And syntax is all here. Yeah, pretty similar to our relational equality operators in the last slide. Okay, and here's some examples of operators in action. So again, like you can see, it's kind of like using these and or statements, using the equals statements, just a bunch of examples to show you how they can be used. And in the most basic sense, they are used a lot in conditional statements, and you know, that's what they're used the most. Okay, give you like a little bit to look at this. It's not really complicated or anything, just some examples. And Leo, do you still have a question, or did you forget to lower your hand? Okay, it's okay, no worries. Okay, let's move on. So now we're going to be talking about or introducing concepts that are a little bit more complex, just a little. So the idea of objects and classes. So classes, like I said, it's the building block of Java, but classes can also be a template for new objects. So again, it would still be that building block of your Java program, but its purpose isn't to run something in the console. It's actually to create, yeah, Nathan, maybe that link could help. I'm also not entirely sure, but yeah, you can check that out if you want to. In the chat, Nathan posted a little link. Okay, so that class can also be a template for new types of objects. So like you could, for example, the car class would be a template for creating car objects. And what objects are is they're like kind of like a thing in Java. I know that's a really vague, but they're like an entity that can do things within Java. Like you could have a car object that can do certain method, or like that has certain methods accompanying it. And I think knowing about objects and classes is going to be, your understanding is going to clarify more as you work with them. And obviously, since a lot of y'all are beginners, you haven't had any experience working with objects. So don't worry about completely understanding what this is. Just know what each of them is. So classes is a blueprint, like a template for creating objects. And these objects are entities that can that have value, but can also have behaviors accompanying them. So, and you can see, we're going to have some examples of objects really soon. And oriented programming, or OOP, is programs that perform, no one says OOP, by the way, programs that perform their behavior as interactions between objects. So instead of focusing on like printing out something to the console or doing something really direct, they program interactions between objects and then do what they want that way. Okay, so strings. When we're working with strings, now you can remember that before we worked with the system.println statement. And that is, okay, within those parentheses as kind of similar to your string. So, okay, so Nathan further clarified, you can't, wait, I don't know if that's exactly what Leo was asking. I think it was more like assigning 0 for like no, 1 for true.
I was asking basically to summarize, I was asking if booleans and integers, or like numbers in general, were interchangeable in JavaScript. Like, remember when you concatenated an integer to a string? Sorry, you remember when you like in the for loop?
Okay. Oh, okay. So
I was asking if you do the same thing with booleans and integers.
I mean, you could print, you can print out a Boolean like the same way you could print out like a variable. But like if you, I don't think you can concatenate them. Yeah, I feel like you can concatenate them to the end of a string to make it all a string. So that's what I'm doing with the variable. When I concatenate it, it like prints it out all as like, okay, you can print out variables.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, okay, you understand. That's good. So yeah, you can, wait, Nathan, correct me again if I'm wrong, but you can just print it out to the console. But yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna move on. Nathan, if you have anything to add on, just put it in the chat and hopefully we can answer Leo's question a little better. Yeah, and again, you can check out the article Nathan put in the chat, or I could work with you later about like answering this, because I would have to do some extra research myself on like the specifics of what you can do or what you can't do. Again, I don't have it off of the top of my head right now. But yeah. Okay, again, Nathan, if you want to add on, feel free to do so. So when you're working with strings, strings are not primitives, they're objects, which means you can't use like arithmetic operators when comparing strings, or you can't like compare them with equals, etc. So this is going to be useful, or you could apply this when you're working with the console especially, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Again, depending on what your hackathon project is, this could or couldn't be useful. But in general, if you're trying to learn Java or get an understanding about like Java in general, it's pretty useful. So to test for string equality, to test if this equals that, you use dot equals parentheses. And like in here, we have an example. If test dot equals yes, statement. Yeah, and you can do like and then you can do like, if it doesn't, do this else, an else statement. And then to access a character in the string, use .char at, and then the index, which is like the place it is in the string. So in Java, strings, their index starts at 0. That means the first letter of the string, the first character of the string, the index of that character is 0. So like, if you had a string that's called no, that has no, and then you print out the character char at 0, it would print out the first letter. In this case, it would print out n, okay? And index starts at 0 for arrays as well, but we're gonna go over that really quick. Okay, so arrays are another type of object. And what arrays do is they're like how you can store multiple variables at once, and how you could use those variables, and you can like move, you can just interact with those variables like when they're all together. So they're a way to like store multiple variables at a time in a more organized fashion. So again, here are the things you need to create arrays. You need int, you need the data type, you need the name, you need the, again, you need a repeat of the data type because that's how you create an object. It's a little bit different than a variable. And then a primitive type, and then you have the number of items or the number of elements in your array within these like square brackets at the end. And again, it's kind of hard to explain using words, but this, as you can see through the PowerPoint, this is the syntax for your array when you're creating your array. And you can see kind of similarities to creating integers. So yeah. Okay, so at the bottom, there's also a little bit of just not, instead of an example, there's just a general frame for creating these arrays. Okay, that's not the only way you can create arrays. If you want to create arrays with predetermined items, so you want to have the elements in the array that you already know, here's how you can just create them like this. You would have the data type, name, same thing, but instead of everything after the assignment operator, the equal sign, that doesn't look like an equal sign, the equal sign, you would have all of the elements of your array within these curly brackets and separated by colons, okay? And of course, you need to end it with a semicolon. Okay, and oh, wait, I don't know what I did. Okay. How would you make a nested array? Okay, so for arrays, there is, okay, to my knowledge, there's no nested arrays. However, or there may be nested arrays, but it's a little, or if there is, it would be complicated. But to my knowledge, there are 2D arrays, which is kind of like a grid. You could have like columns and rows. Okay, is that what you're talking about? Okay, yeah, 2D arrays requires a little more complicated syntax. Yeah, you can probably look at it in reading more about arrays right here on how to create 2D arrays. I'm not going to go over the syntax right now because it's a little harder to demonstrate, and also I'm afraid like I'll forget certain details about how to create 2D arrays because I haven't worked with them for a while now. But yeah, you can definitely create 2D arrays that have rows and columns, and those are also really useful. Okay, hopefully, okay, yeah, multi-dimensional 2D, yeah. Okay, when you're accessing an array, again, the index starts at 0 for arrays. R bracket 0 is the first element in the array. Yeah, Nathan has that little thing. And then the link in the chat. And then you can also change these elements and use the values of these elements, etc. Yeah, so there are different methods or like different ways you can actually change these elements and use these different values. But again, we're running out of time a little. And again, in the link, there's going to be more info on these different ways you can actually work with the elements, as well as different ways you can work with arrays in general. Okay, we are close to finishing. Okay, so scanners. What scanners are is someone was asking, I think maybe it was Albert, it was probably Albert, I was asking about how you could work with input from the console. And usually the most simple way of doing that is using scanners. There are different ways you can read from the console or read from a different lines of input. but like print stream and buffered reader. But scanners are the most, although they can be a little bit more, they can be a little longer. They are the most simple way to read lines of input from the console or from a file. Yeah, okay, great, Albert. So reading from a file, here's the syntax. So you would just have the new file, and then you would have your file name inside those parentheses, and then you could use these different methods, has next line and then next line, which kind of help you read through each line of that file. And what process this lines mean is like do anything with that string now that you have that string stored into a variable. So now you can use, or it's like you have that string stored. So like you can find the length, and if the length is greater than 10, you could do something with it, or there's a lot of different things you could do with it from that point. But now you have the information stored within your program. And then reading from console, so reading like from like you typing like user input in the console would be similar. You just do scanner input, and then instead of new file, you have system.in, and it does essentially the same thing and it has the same methods as your file, and it works similar as well. So if you are using Java as part of your hackathon project, I think that these scanners would be helpful, especially if you want to do something that requires user input and kind of it's more interactive, So yeah, it could be a possible way you could do something. More about scanners in that link. As a general info, if you want to ask questions about hackathons specifically, just ask Nathan directly, because he's has led this hackathon effort. And so he's one of the leaders of this effort, and he knows a lot more about hackathon specifics. Okay. Or you could ask your mentors if you want. And I think mentors would be a good way to get that information directly. Okay. So like I said, maybe it was Albert again, it's probably Albert, who asked about doing powers. Yeah, so math.pow would just be the math package. So importing packages at the most basic level, some things need imported packages to work in your code, and extra functionalities can be imported. So at this point, you may be like, okay, that seems like a lot of work. Why won't you just have everything included at the beginning? It's so much easier. But there's a lot of different things you can do within like that. And if you had it every single time you created a new project or a new class, it would be very slow and it would overload your computer as well as the compiler. So that's why we do things a little bit separately. So you need to import some packages for certain elements of certain things you can do, like arrays and scanners. You need to import packages for them to work. So some examples: java.util.asterisk imports everything, like all of the packages into your code. Java.util.io, I think that has to do with input. And then java.util.arrays and scanner, those will just be, arrays and your scanner. So yeah, I think IO has to do with files and input. Okay, and then you can read more about programming and oh, not programming, I just read from the link. You can read more about packages and the specifics in this link down below. So like a YouTuber. Okay, so now we're gonna do a little exercise. Now this should be pretty simple because I have all of the syntax up here for you guys. I just want you guys to be able to put the syntax together. So what I want you guys to do is write a simple system.out.println statement within a method, within a main method, within a class that prints out, hi, my name is, and then your name. Okay, that's all I want you to do. And then after that, it's pretty simple. You basically just have to reorder this code and kind of put some extra elements like parentheses. But whatever you have, whether it's Eclipse, Notepad, your online compiler, I want you to try to write a system.println statement that says, hi, my name is, and then your name. And now this is going to be pretty simple. And if you have a missing parentheses or whatever, a bracket that causes your code to be wrong, it's okay. The most important thing is to just know each of these elements of your program, the parts of your program, and to understand why they go where, which goes in within each, what goes in within each loop of programming consciousness, like what I was talking about with the Lego. And yeah, and so that's the most important thing. And yeah, this exercise will basically wrap up most of this workshop. So hopefully I'll give you guys like 3, 5, maybe just 3 minutes to do this. Again, if you don't finish or whatever, it's fine. Yeah, just do your best. And Albert again, yeah, it was you who asked the power. So, okay. And if you have any questions about like how to do this, feel free to ask me. Yeah, so Albert was very quick. He's already done. Okay, oh wait, let me see. Yeah, okay, Albert, that looks very good. I won't like read it out loud because that just gives away the answer, but yeah, very good job. Okay, seeing that it's 4:06, I'll move on. If you haven't finished, don't worry. You can always just try to finish it up after you're done. If you want to, you could send what you have right now to me in the chat. And if I see any replies, I could just correct them and just send them privately. Like, or if there's any corrections, send that privately back to you if you would just like to see if you what you did. But for now, like in your specific ways you could correct it. But for now, let me just give the answer on Eclipse. I'll just write it out really quickly on Eclipse. So let me share again. And I know we're a little over the time. I apologize. We'll be done really quickly. So again, let me just get rid of, okay, you know what? I can just comment this all out. Oh, wait, this is an opportunity. So if you want to comment out big sections of code, you don't have to do dash // for every single line. You could just do / asterisk to begin the comment out section, and then asterisk slash to end that section of what you're commenting. So that does the same effect as just doing that // except now you can comment out big paragraphs. Okay, so very simple. Right here we already have the class and the main method. And if I just want to print out system.println, Hi, my name is Emily. Okay, wow, that is a little creepy, the smiley face, but it's okay. So let me just run this and you can look. So hi, my name is Emily, printed out to the console, pretty simple. And again, you guys, I did get some replies in the chat about how to do it. And for those of you who did just chat what you had to me, what I'm very happy with was just the order of what you had was correct. Like you had the class, then the main method, and then the println statement. And that shows like you understand the different, like the most basic concept of what you're doing here when you're programming, which I think is the most important part. Okay, let me share back to the PowerPoint. Okay, yeah, and if those of you have to go, you could just go, you could leave right now. I know our numbers have dropped, but like, yeah, so if you do really have to go, I completely understand. Just, you can leave, we are almost done as, anyway. Okay, so some additional resources that I have. So this textbook is a good introduction to Java. The AP curriculum uses this. So it's called Building Java Programs, a Back to Basics Approach. There are 5 editions right now. The AP curriculum, or like our school, my school, Interlake High School, uses the 4th edition, but really any edition is fine that you get from if you want to get this book, because they basically have the same effect anyway. So yeah, you can just get any any edition you want if you choose to use this textbook. And so yeah, it's a good introduction to Java. It's pretty overall. A lot of what I have in my PowerPoint is kind of like related to this, since I learned APCS, so I learned a lot from this book as well. And some online tutorials I find are helpful is there's one by Oracle. And again, like I mentioned, there's also one by W3 Schools. So W3 Schools, again, it's like a really good website, and I personally like it since you can actually like input some code into it, since it has exercises embedded in its website, which I think is like just super cool, you know, and like it's pretty helpful when you're actually trying to learn. In Oracle, it's like really in depth. So you can also use that. Okay, that is all I have for today. If you have any questions, or for those of you who don't have any questions, you can feel free to leave right now, or like you can feel free to exit the meeting. Yeah, no problem. I'll send my here. I'll put my. You can reach out to me through Discord if you have any like some questions that you just want to ask me. Yeah, and here I can. Oh, the PowerPoint link, it will be sent out through an email soon after this meeting is over. And yeah, for everyone who has said thank you, you're absolutely welcome. Thank you guys for coming. And again, if you have any questions, yeah, just let me know right now, or you can reach out to me through Discord. You can probably find me in the participation link. My name is in green, so yeah. No problem, Noah. Bye, Bradley. Okay, see you guys later. Again, if questions, stay behind. Albert, Michael, do you guys have any questions? If not, you guys can feel free to, okay.
You can stop the recording now.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.